Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Thursday, so hello, my dragon friends. It's Araya here, coming to you live and for the love of dragons, because we love our dragons, and some of us are dragons. So if you don't know me, if you're new to the group, we've had a lot of new members lately. My name is Araya, also known as Tana in my dragon aspect. You'll quite often see me doing lives. I come on every week, and sometimes you'll see my dragon coming straight through my eyes. It gets very clear when she's very present. And hi, Marcy, good to see you. I like to come live every week because I'm here to give you guys tools and guidance to connect with your dragons, to connect with the dragons in the land around you and the universe, and to actually expand your spiritual growth, expand your journey, your understanding of the universe, all because you are really open to understanding the energies of the dragons, because they are holding a lot of tools and keys for you. So one of the things when I come live is to answer your questions, and we had some great questions come up this week. We've been doing a lot of really fun question and answer things the last few weeks, and I apologize I was gone last week. I was sick. This dragon was out sick, weird stomach flu going around here in our local area, and so thankfully it was short-lived. Thanks for all the healing energy that everybody sent. But leading up to this week, we had a great question in the group yesterday, thanks to Susan, about why is it that they haven't found any dragon bones? Why do we have all these dinosaur fossils and different types of things? There's mammoth fossils found, there's saber-toothed tiger types found, there's all the rhinoceri and the families down in Africa with elephants and those kind of things. But fossils and the bones that they're from, I love that Max brought this up because it was a really good point of how few of the species that were on the planet over different time periods and eons have actually been discovered, and how rare they are to find their bones actually still intact. The almost perfect storm that needs to happen for those bones to come out as a fossil and then to be found or unearthed. So in some sense, I agree that it's probably a very limited number that have actually made it through based on whatever the dragon's bones and things were made up of. But also knowing that, as Marlene pointed out, dinosaurs equals dragons in a lot of schools of thought. And in their family lineage, they are actually both more closely related to the avian species, that's shown in the Natural History Museum, than to reptiles. So if they're closely related, who's to say that some of the bones that have been found, because sometimes they do find, just a couple of bones instead of a whole skeleton, and they somehow place it in a category that's linked to certain species, whether it's velociraptors or things that they've already identified and recognized, and not knowing if the wing structures were made of cartilage and so were disappeared, or what other body parts were there. There's the potential that some of those that have been identified as dinosaurs are actually a form of dragon, and where that link is. There was a great documentary that I watched, I think it was called The Last Dragon or something like that, and this hypothesis of, well, did the dinosaurs and the dragons actually inhabit the land at the same time? Were they intermixing, or were they around each other, and what would that look like if we were to actually discover that? So some other things to think about is, one, when the dragons leave the planet, a lot of them have the capacity to actually just shift their body dimensionally and move away. They didn't necessarily have to leave anything behind. If they did leave things behind, like the dinosaurs did, my gut feeling is that they really haven't been unearthed yet. And I feel like we're moving into a time on the planet where the crust is expanding and things are being unearthed. There's, because of radio, I don't even know the term for it, where it's like thermal photography, where we can see things, even structures, like they're starting to discover different pyramids or structures that are buried under jungle that we would never find otherwise. And they're starting to see them even on the ocean floors, where we're starting to see, because of thermal imaging and our technology now, where there are structures and not just like mountain peaks that are in a chain, that there might actually be temples or structures underneath those. So as those types of discoveries get made and unearthed, we start to realize how far down some of the layers of crust and existence are, right? So in my gut feeling, I think there's lots of dragon bones that just have not been discovered yet. And what do we know about dragons as far as their behavior? They like to live in caves. They like to be underground. They like to be nested and buried in. So if they were they weren't usually dying or being eaten by other creatures, right? They're sort of the king of the chain. They would probably be dying of old age or from some other incident, and probably dying in their caves or underground somewhere. So I have a feeling we're going to come across some things as more either technology develops or more layers of the Earth's crust, because they were around a very long time ago. We do have a sense and feeling that they were around in like Middle Ages, in the 1300s, 1500s. There's stories and things about them being around at that time. So why are there not any dragon bones through Europe? Were they in a cave somewhere that we haven't found? Were they able to shift dimension and just leave? Because at a certain point, a lot of them just chose to leave. And we've seen in my experiences where they're underground, energetically locked in the Earth's core, because they shapeshifted and left their body. They sort of I would say the term like vaporized. They will just leave and shapeshift into a higher dimensional plane. That's how knowledgeable they are. That's how magical they are. And if we look at, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to look at, all right, how far back does this go, and why do we even think there's dragons? So if there's no evidence of dragons on the planet, right? There's no bones, and yet the word is there. The word is in every culture. The art is in every culture, and it's, at least in all of our Western languages, it's the same word. Drakon, the original Greek, from the area of the world in the Mediterranean and that whole Eastern European and up into Northern Europe, where they were common, or in a lot of stories and a lot of, quote, myths, that word carried across the globe. Isn't it interesting that in the Western side of the world, we sort of associate the word dragon, or at least society does, I don't, with something demonic, something devilish or dangerous, fiery beast that's perilous, right? That we have to kill and beat down. Well, that's sort of more modern, isn't it? That's like Middle Ages, 13 to 1600, more in our modern society. Well, look at the ancient East Asian culture, that the dragons have been represented in their artwork for thousands of years. They were represented with the emperors. They're embedded in all of their spiritual imagery and iconization with, even all their architecture. Where I talked recently about the dragons in the Chinese architecture, that there's 9 dragons that are always protecting the emperor's palace and many of the sacred structures. So that association, that word association, I think the Chinese word was long, something like that. But that was always associated with fertility, with water, with goodness, with protection, with plentiful. It has a really good imagery in their iconic culture. And yet we also haven't found any dragon bones in that side of the world either. Part of it is because of their ancientness. Part of it is because they have the capacity and the skill to leave. And part of it, I feel, truly is, dragons are shape-shifting masters. And whether they were represented in a species that maybe we've assumed was a dinosaur, or they were actually able to shapeshift and move. There's even in the Chinese culture a form of dragon. There's a word, the long wang or something like that, that is the kings, the dragon kings, and that they have this myth, we're going to call it a myth, of 4, hold on one second, Grace, there's 4 dragon kings that actually reign over the seas of the east, north, west, and south. So they have this imagery, this representation of them. And whether they are, I remember walking the land as dragon form. It was a long, long, long time ago. And all the other times that I've walked the land as dragon, I was actually energetically in a human body, and yet as dragon, like here as a dragon representative, sharing and protecting and trying to instill a certain level of knowledge and awareness and love frequency in the dynasties that were in power, and helping be like counselors and advisors to them. So that's, I think, where part of that imagery from the Asian culture comes from, as far as them being in charge of the seas, in charge of the oceans, and these protectors. And that in that level, it was mostly an etheric presence where they were energetically, the Nagas, the water dragons that are so inherent in that culture, were present in the waterfalls. But were they actually physical dragons down in 3D, or were they just such a clear energetic representation or presentation to the beings that were there working with them, the monks that were very capable of crossing dimensional layers and veils and perceiving them, so that they came through in the culture and the history and the richness of their existence, but didn't have to have 3D bodies? So, as most topics are, I think there's two sides to it, and I think there's a lot of different answers that play into this, that many of them were just etheric experiences. Those that were physical, some of them were very, very ancient, so they're buried under layers and layers of things, and others that were more modern but just have not been unearthed yet, and some of them have been unearthed and called dinosaurs. So lots of available food for thought there, just to sit with and go, this is a topic that, maybe we can put it out there as a group and energetically create, like, all right, let's start seeing some unearthing. If there are things out there, let's find a way to energetically find that way to unearth it. Because as the powerful creators that we are, if we all have a mindset that we want to start seeing dragon bones so that everybody in the world actually has proof, I think we could probably create it. We're pretty powerful manifestors. So Grace, let me go back to your question. Do you know if dragons show up in Native American culture? Grace, I don't know that for sure. I haven't seen any specific icon or iconization of that. Partly because I think the Native American culture is, at least in our experience, more new, or was more isolated from all the stuff that's going on in Europe, because they were just here on this beautiful North American continent and had it to themselves for centuries and centuries. But yeah, bring them forward. Wake up, y'all. Susan. I feel like anything that was associated with the Native Americans, everything that I've experienced, even in my old set of medicine cards with Native American, was all about eagle, bear, all the other forest animals, mountain lion were the larger predator ones that were very present, the bison, the power of the bison. But I have not seen in Native North America necessarily much with the dragons. And yes, Susan, absolutely bringing in the Mayans. So it could have been temperature-wise, not necessarily many of the dragons might have liked super cold. And most of the North American region was probably a bit colder than the same regions over in Europe, at least in the northern latitudes. And here, going into Susan's comment here with the Mayans, that down in those equatorial latitudes, they definitely had a connection with Quetzalcoatl, who was the serpent god. And that was the other meaning in the Asian word long, that it was a serpent, or sacred serpent, and those were associated with calling them dragon. So those cultures, the South American cultures, definitely have that representation, and it could simply be the time on the planet where things were globally, as far as, we're going through another pole shift, right? Our pole has changed, I think, 4 degrees in at least the latter half of my adult life, that we're aware of. I haven't paid attention to measurements since then, but they're predicting a pole shift over time. Well, if there's pole shifts happening and much more difference in the climatology of the planet and what was under snow or under much colder areas, and maybe South America was more prevalent, then maybe the dragons were more present with them. Or those cultures tend to have, like China, a deeper spiritual connection to the etheric realms, where maybe it's represented in their culture more, not so much because the dragons were on the land there, but because their shamans and priests and priestesses we're able to journey and connect with them more directly and bring those stories forth and bring those energies forth and share that with the people in a way that left a mark on their culture. So always just food for thought, because we don't have the definite answers, but we have the knowledge of what we've lived, what we know, what we remember. And quite often in just discussing these things, you guys will hear triggers and have pieces of memory come back that sort of make you go, oh, yeah, but I remember actually walking the land, or I remember reading this thing about where they found something over in China. And I do recall, actually, now that that's coming up, reading and seeing something online about, I want to say maybe 6 years ago, where they had supposedly found like a dragon egg or a tiny embryonic dragon it was tiny, inside an egg. I don't know the validity of it. I don't remember where the source was, but I do recall reading something like that. So my truest gut in my heart is that some things are going to start being unearthed with the higher level of technology that we have now. And let's see, Susan Ray, the pole shift. Anyone else being guided to visit Iceland besides me? Let's go, Araya. Absolutely, Iceland is on my list, Susan, as is Antarctica, interestingly. And someone else, I just recently was speaking with someone about Iceland who is, I believe, one of the ones considering or joining up for the Eye of the Dragon program starting in January, who had been there and was just talking about how powerful and potent it was energetically, especially with the dragons. And I know that I need to go up there to see the Northern Lights, especially if the dragons are out in them. And yeah, I love that dragon on the couch. I should share that, you guys, because here I'm talking away on all this other Dragon Month stuff. I have 2 new friends as of yesterday. Look at this guy. I have never seen a stuffy dragon like this. Look at this beautiful, I'm going to get up close, all the flecks of gold. He's like silver gray with all these beautiful gold on him. Just incredible. I love him. And this, we've had teal and gold in the field this week, especially in session, and this beautiful teal and gold dragon showed up yesterday in my life, so I had to get both of them and bring them home. My house is getting more full and more full. I love it. And hello, Robin, great question. I know a few Native Americans who believe dragons are not good. Yeah, it's interesting that most in the West have an association that dragons are not good. And yet in South America and all of Asia, they have this benevolent protector, fertility, water connection of being such a positive, incredible thing. Yeah, aren't they gorgeous? Hello, Candace. Good to see you. So thanks for tuning in, you guys. Sorry I came on a little bit late. You know, the dragons don't want to be locked down in time. And I had a very full set of calls today. I'm really excited that I am pretty certain that the Eye of the Dragon program starting January 2020 is full. We have a full group, and I'm really excited about the group that has come together. It's a powerhouse group, and there's going to be a lot of shift in that. So if it's a program that you've been considering, you're not sure about, and you want to connect and find out more, I'm going to start a waiting list so that when I have the next group that's ready, we'll just get them started rather than necessarily waiting for January 2020, or 2021 for the next group. And you never know. I'm still waiting for some of the deposits to come in on those spaces. So until the deposits come in, technically the spaces aren't taken. But I know that the majority of them are committed, and they have another 2 weeks, I think, to get their deposit in. But even if you've just been wanting to know what it is, start that energy flow if you're feeling a heart pull to it, because it might be your program a year from now, 2 years from now, and planting that seed or getting that just energy in your field of like, what does it do for me? What's out there that I could strive for down the road is pretty exciting. Hello, Julia and Robin. Thanks for coming on, you guys. And I will see you next week. I do still have time in my schedule. Not a lot, I gotta say, especially with Thanksgiving week next week. It's sort of packed right now. But discovery calls to see what kind of work we can do together. What's the right thing for you? 20-minute dragon readings, 75-minute sessions. You don't have to dive into a 6-week or a 4-month program to work with me. Lots of stuff can happen one-on-one, especially with those dragons, and especially with a lot of big, fast shift, because they don't like to waste time. They're very efficient. All right, have a great afternoon, you guys. Always good to see you, and thanks for that great question, Susan. And Marlene for the input on dinosaurs equal dragons, and Max for your input on the fossilization, there's a big word, of bones, and how imperfect it is, and how much of a small percentage it is of what we actually have in our knowledge base. All right, have a great week, you guys, and we'll see you next week. I'm not going to come on Thursday. It's Thanksgiving for us here in the United States, so I might come on Wednesday or Friday instead, but I'll post that in the group. All right, bye everybody. Send your questions.